My name is Rachel. I'm 32 years old, and 6 months ago, I thought I had the life I always wanted. I had a good job, a nice apartment in Austin, Texas, and a man I genuinely believed was my forever person. His name was Derek. We had been together for 4 years, living together for 2 of them. We split everything down the middle: rent, groceries, utilities, all of it. I was proud of that. I liked that we felt like equals. I liked that we had built something together from nothing, and I trusted him. That was the biggest thing. I trusted him completely. So when he sat me down at our kitchen table on a Tuesday night, calm as anything, and said the words that would unravel everything we had built, I was not prepared. Not even close. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "My mother is moving in, permanently, and you're going to be covering her expenses." Just like that. No question. No conversation. A statement. Like it had already been decided. Like I had already agreed. I sat there for a second because I genuinely thought I had misheard him. I asked him to repeat it, and he did. Word for word, same tone, same face. And then he added, "If you don't like it, you can move out." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said, "Understood." And something inside me went very, very quiet. Now let me back up, because you need to understand who Derek's mother is before any of this makes sense. Her name is Linda, and she had made it absolutely clear from the moment Derek and I got serious that she did not think I was good enough for her son. Not because I was a bad person, not because I had ever disrespected her, but because I had opinions. Because I didn't just smile and nod. Because I once told her very politely that I preferred not to spend every single Sunday at her house. That was the original sin, apparently. After that, she started doing things. Small things at first. She would call Derek while we were on dates, and he would step away for 45 minutes. She would make comments about my cooking at family dinners. She told Derek's aunt that I was difficult. She once showed up at our apartment unannounced on a Saturday morning and let herself in with a spare key Derek had given her without telling me. I had just gotten out of the shower. I stood there in my own hallway, holding a towel, and Linda smiled at me like she had every right to be there. I told Derek that same night that the spare key situation needed to be addressed. He told me I was being dramatic. That was the first real crack. I saw it then, but I told myself it was manageable. I told myself every couple had friction with in-laws. I told myself Derek loved me and that was enough. I kept telling myself things like that for 2 more years. The Tuesday night conversation was not dramatic. That's what people don't understand when I tell this story. He wasn't yelling. I wasn't yelling. It was almost worse because of how calm it was. Like he had rehearsed it. Like Linda had rehearsed it with him. He told me she was selling her house in Dallas and she needed a place to go. He said our apartment had a second bedroom that was just being used as an office, and that Linda would take that room. He said since I worked from home, I could help her with her appointments and her prescriptions during the day. He said he had already looked into the cost of her medications, and that my income could comfortably absorb it. He used the phrase, comfortably absorb it, like I was a financial plan, like I was a line item. And then came the part I still cannot fully process even now. He said, I already told her she could come. She's moving in on the 15th. That was 11 days away. He had already told her. He had made the decision without me, told his mother yes, given her a move-in date, and then sat down to inform me like I was a tenant being notified of a policy change. And when I didn't immediately respond, he said, "Look, she's my mother. This is not up for debate. If this is a problem for you, then maybe you should think about whether this is the right situation for you." I looked at him for a long time. Long enough that it got uncomfortable. And then I said, "Understood." I got up. I went to the bedroom. I closed the door softly, and I started thinking, if you think you know what I did next, I promise you, you don't. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was crying into my pillow or falling apart. I was thinking. Clearly. Sharper than I had thought in years, actually. I lay there in the dark, next to Derek, who fell asleep like nothing had happened. Like he had just told me we were out of milk or something. And I stared at the ceiling, and I made a list in my head. Not an emotional list, a practical one. Because here is what people do not tell you about moments like that. When something finally breaks all the way, when the last thread snaps, you do not feel sadness first. You feel clarity. And my clarity that night was this. I had been quietly disappearing inside this relationship for 2 years. And I had been so focused on holding things together that I had stopped noticing how much of myself I was losing in the process. Derek had not asked me. He had not discussed it. He had not even pretended it was a conversation. He had made a unilateral decision about my home, my money, my time, and my daily life, and then presented it to me as settled fact. And when I didn't immediately comply, he had handed me the door. So I decided that night, quietly, with no announcement and no dramatic moment, that I was going to take it. The next morning, I woke up before Derek and I made coffee, and I sat at the kitchen table and I opened my laptop. I went to our lease agreement first. I had signed it. My name was on it just like his. I read every single line of that document, something I should have paid more attention to months ago, honestly. There was a clause, 60 days written notice to terminate, but there was also a mutual release option if both tenants agreed to vacate. I noted that. Then I called my office building's leasing company, not our apartment, my work. I had been renting a small office downtown for client meetings even though I mostly worked from home, and I knew the woman who managed that building. Her name was Carol, and she was one of those no-nonsense Texas women who had seen everything. I told Carol I might need to make some changes soon and asked if she knew of any furnished short-term apartments in the area. She texted me 3 listings within an hour. Carol did not ask questions. God bless Carol. Derek left for work at 8 and kissed me on the cheek and said, "We good?" And I smiled and said, "We're good." And I miled and meant it in a way he did not understand yet. I spent that entire day making calls and sending emails and doing research with the kind of focused energy I had not felt in a long time. I contacted a tenant rights organization because I wanted to know exactly where I stood legally. The woman I spoke to was incredibly helpful. She confirmed that since my name was on the lease, I had equal rights to the unit and that no additional occupant could be added without my written consent. Linda moving in without my agreement was not just disrespectful. It was actually not legally clean either. I wrote that down. I called my bank and I moved my direct deposit to an account Derek did not have access to, one I had kept from before we moved in together, that I had just never bothered to separate fully. I transferred 3 months of savings into it. Not his money, my money. Money I had earned doing my job every single day, while also, apparently, auditioning to become Linda's unpaid live-in caretaker. By the time Derek came home that evening, I had accomplished more in one day than I had in the previous 6 months of just tolerating things. He came in talking about what he wanted for dinner, and I made pasta. And we watched television, and I was perfectly normal. I was pleasant. I asked about his day. He told me about a meeting that went long and a coworker who annoyed him. I nodded. I laughed at the right moments. And the whole time I was thinking about the 14th. He had said the 15th was Linda's move-in date. That meant the 14th was my last full day. And I had plans for the 14th that Derek did not know about yet. I had already called 2 of my closest girlfriends, and without telling them everything I had asked if I could crash with one of them for a couple of weeks while I sorted something out. My friend Danielle said yes before I even finished the sentence. She just said, "Say less. Room's ready whenever you are." That's a real friend. I texted her back one word, Thursday. I had 11 days and I used every single one of them. The 14th came on a Thursday and I was ready. Derek left for work at 8 in the morning like always, kissed me on the cheek like always, said, "Big day tomorrow," with this little smile on his face that I will never forget as long as I live, and I smiled back and said, "It really is." He had no idea. The moment his car turned out of the parking lot, I moved. I had been quietly organizing for 10 days. I knew exactly what was mine and what wasn't. I had brought things into that apartment, and I was taking those things out of it. My grandmother's quilt, my work equipment, my books, my kitchen stuff that I had bought before Derek and I ever moved in together. I had boxes already broken down and stored in my office closet. I had packing tape. I had labels. I had a moving van reserved under my name for 9 in the morning. 2 of my guy friends, Marcus and Troy, Showed up at 9 on the dot, and we worked clean and fast, and by noon, my entire life was in that van. I walked through every room one time. Not for sentiment, just to make sure I had everything, and then I did the things that mattered most legally and practically before I locked that door for the last time. I left a formal written notice on the kitchen counter. It was typed and dated, and it stated clearly that I was vacating the premises and terminating my tenancy, and that I had already contacted the leasing office to begin the mutual release process. I had spoken to the leasing office 2 days earlier. The property manager, a woman named Susan, had been professional and direct. She confirmed that, without my continued tenancy, Derek's income alone did not meet the lease qualification threshold, which meant the lease, as it currently existed, could not simply continue with just him on it. He would need to requalify or renegotiate a new lease entirely. I had not sabotaged anything. I had simply stopped holding something up that only stayed standing because I was underneath it. I left the written notice, I left my key on top of it, and I walked out. Marcus held the door. Troy carried the last box. I did not look back at the apartment. I got in my car, and I followed the moving van to my new place. A small, furnished one-bedroom I had signed a short-term lease on 4 days earlier, and when I walked in and set my grandmother's quilt on the bed, I sat down and took the first full breath I had taken in 2 years. Derek called at 6:15 that evening. I let it ring. He called 4 more times in the next 30 minutes. Then he texted. The first text said, "What is going on?" No question mark. Then, "Where is your stuff?" Then, "Rachel, call me right now." Then a longer one that said he had come home to find my notice, and that this was an overreaction, and that we needed to talk like adults. I read every single message, and I did not respond to any of them that night. Not because I was being cruel, because I had said everything I needed to say on that paper on the counter, and I had nothing left to add. Around 9 o'clock, he called from a different number. Probably figuring I was screening him, and I picked up that one. He started talking immediately, loud and fast, saying I had blindsided him and embarrassed him, and that his mother was arriving tomorrow, and what was he supposed to tell her? And I said, very calmly, "Tell her the spare bedroom is available." And I hung up. His mother moved in on the 15th as planned. Derek requalified for a smaller unit in the same complex with a higher rent because his income alone put him in a different bracket. I know this because Susan, the property manager, is surprisingly forthcoming when you ask the right questions professionally. Within 3 weeks, Derek was calling me with a completely different tone, quieter. He said living with Linda was harder than he expected. He said she had opinions about everything. He said the apartment felt small. He said he missed me, and I listened to all of it and I said, "Derek, I really do hope things get easier for you." And I meant that. But I also knew that what he missed was not me specifically. What he missed was the version of his life where someone else was quietly absorbing every hard thing so he never had to feel it. And that person was gone. I had a new apartment, a cleared head, and a savings account with my name only on it. I was 32 years old and I was starting completely over, and it felt nothing like failure. It felt exactly like freedom. Some people call that burning it down. I call it finally knowing your worth and acting like it.